Welcome to Work from the Inside Out, a podcast that highlights real-life stories, practical strategies, and best practices for transitioning your career from unhappiness and dissatisfaction to fulfillment, meaning, and joy. Now here is your host, career and executive coach, Tammy Guler-Loeb.
Hey everybody, I am so excited to introduce you to my guest today, Demetria Henderson. Demetria is the CEO and founder of DFH Coaching and Consulting, LLC. Prior to formally launching her coaching and consulting business, Demetria spent over 15 years in the corporate world before going back to school to earn her Ph.D. in business management. She advocates for equal access to opportunity and fair treatment for all in the workplace. I can go for that one. As a coach, she works with mid-career professionals who are frustrated and tired of being marginalized in the workplace. Grab a seat at the table without feeling like a sellout so they feel empowered and respected while making a meaningful impact. As a consultant, she works with organizations to help them in creating and maintaining workplace cultures in which all employees feel included and have a sense of belonging. Demetria has a BS in mathematics, an MS in organizational development, and a PhD in business management. In addition, she is a certified professional coach. So please join me in welcoming Demetria Henderson. Welcome, Demetria.
Thank you, Tammy.
Well, it's so good to have you here today. Thank you for being here. So tell us about your life, work from the inside out. We talk a lot about the transitions people have made in their careers and the decisions they've made along the way, changes that they've made. So I'm curious about the early years. What was it like for you?
So how early do you want to go back?
You want to go back. I mean, everybody has a different starting point where they look back and say, when I was at this point, it kind of got me thinking about this or that. Or some people say, when I was little, I used to want to be this. And other people start, back when they finished college or whatever. But you have such an interesting background. I bet wherever you start would be interesting.
I think I'll probably start somewhere around when I had the first real job or so. So as you mentioned, my background is math. I actually math and statistics, because I actually went to grad school for statistics as well, just never completed that degree.
Oh, wow.
And it was one of those situations where, growing up, I was like, smart Black girl. And so therefore there was really that push to get a lot of us into engineering and those types of programs. And so I thought I was going to be an electrical engineer and took that first EE class. I was just like, what the hell is this? Get me out of here. I do not care about circuits. So then it was one of those situations where I was like, okay, what the heck am I supposed to do? Because I don't want to be an engineer, but it's like, you had to take all these math classes. And so I ended up, and that's how I ended up getting the bachelor's in math, because it was like one of those things where you've taken enough math classes, you can easily switch, majors to that. And so that's how that transpired. But then it was after I graduated, it was one of those situations where, now what the hell do I do with a math degree? Because I did not want to teach. I did not want to teach elementary, high school, any of that fun stuff. And so I learned about actuarial science. And so I was like, that sounds intriguing. And so then I substitute taught for a year, living at home with parents. And so while I was doing that, I started, researching universities and started applying to programs, thinking that actuarial science statistics was where I was going to go. And that's what I did. Ended up getting accepted. I started out at Ohio State University. I'm actually going back a lot further than what you even asked. So started out at Ohio State University, did a year there, and realizing that I went into a stats program without never having had a stats class. So it's interesting that I was a math major, but that was one of the electives that I just never took. And so it was interesting because it was like, I wasn't doing that great in the program, but I was like, and so what I ended up doing was transferring back to Louisiana State. That's where I got my bachelor's and started over from scratch in their experimental statistics program.
Ah,
And it was interesting because that was the right fit for me because they pretty much taught like from the foundation, from the very beginning. And so it was one of those things as I progressed through, I was like, oh, this crap was so easy. Why was I struggling so much at Ohio State? And it was simply because I didn't have the foundations. And so, but with all that being said, ended up, going through the program, took comps, did all that other fun stuff, but ended up getting a job while I was still trying to finish up my master's thesis, and ended up taking a job as a contractor doing SAS programming, statistical programming. And that is really where I kind of like spent a lot of my time in the workplace. Anything dealing with sort of like, playing with numbers, analytics, using that particular software.
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that has been my background. So kind
So
of
was
doing.
that was your 15 years in the corporate world?
Yes,
Well, that's
yeah.
interesting. You really persevered. You struggled that year in Ohio, came back, and then found this other program in Louisiana, and you got all the way through to taking your comps, and then found a job and didn't go back and finish the master's. Is it because you just really didn't need it to move forward, or was it just one of those things that just you never got around to, or?
I felt as though I didn't need it to move forward because for me, what was more important was just having the knowledge, right? So I knew that I had the skill set and I had the knowledge. But what happened was when I actually had gone back home for the holidays to try to finish my research, it was one of those situations where back in the day, stuff was on the mainframe.
Oh,
and did not realize because basically I'd had a graduate assistantship where I was working, I think it was Department of Transportation, so I was using their data. And so they had a mainframe system, and I did not realize that after 30 days, data was deleted. So of course, yes, I went back to finish my stuff, and I was like, I don't have data. And I was just like, there's no way I'm starting this over.
Wow.
And that was really why I never went back and actually finished that degree, because I had to finish up that paper and actually submit that. And I was just like, yeah, I already have the job. So it's like I'm in the workforce now. So we're just going to let that one go.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's how that came about.
Was that when you realized the data wasn't there, was that painful, or was that easy to let that go because you were already in?
I mean, it was painful because it was like I had already done a good bit of work.
Yeah.
And to realize it's just like, because again, this was in Louisiana. At that point in time, I was now living in North Carolina.
Oh, you were.
Yes. So it wasn't like it was going to be, there was no internet, for me to go back. Yeah, I'm aging myself. I'm telling you guys how old I am. So, there was no logging into a system, for me to actually go in there and do some work. So I just did not see how it was feasible for me to do it. And maybe I could have done it maybe when I came back home over the Christmas holidays, but it was just like, I just let it go. And I was just like, you know what? I have the knowledge, I have the skill set. I was very thankful for that, experience. And so I just took it and went from there. So
yeah, wow.
Yeah. So from there, it's like, basically I started out as a contractor doing consulting work for different companies. And it was there where I was really, truly first introduced to this whole idea of organizational behavior, which is where I am now. So all those 25 years later, I guess it was, give or take. Yeah. So, and I was introduced to that, interestingly, because, you start going places and you're working with folks and you're seeing all these different dynamics that are taking place with people and how they're engaging and interacting with one another. And, being that Black woman, you start to see things and it's like, yeah, there has to be a better way, and so that always had stayed with me. through my entire time in corporate America. And so it was always on the back burner that eventually at some point in time, I would probably go back to school to get my PhD. And that was an area that intrigued me for me to kind of like, go back and maybe do a little bit of research, find out if this was going to be my thing. And again, it just stayed with me. But again, I just continued working. Life goes on. You get these jobs and you move on, et cetera. And, the bills start coming. You got to pay these bills. And, some of those visions and dreams, they kind of like go by the wayside for a little bit.
You get accustomed to kind of, getting, especially if you're getting sort of settled into the corporate life and all the different jobs. It sounds like you worked for a few different companies. And did you eventually get a full-time role somewhere?
Yes. I was at Bank of America in Charlotte, North Carolina. Yes. Yeah.
So then you probably got promoted here and there.
Oh, yeah, I bought a house and everything.
Yeah.
But again, I think when there is something that you're really probably destined to do and that is really truly pulling you, the universe is always going to continue to kind of like, remind you of things.
Yes.
And so again, all that stuff was really there for me. I mean, like I had gone through the process of, like I actually even took like IO classes, like industrial site classes at like a local university out there. Yeah, UNC Charlotte, just to see, it's like, let me just take a couple of classes and see if this is something that is really interesting to me.
How did you know that was even a field at that point? Like I know, I mean, I was a psychology undergrad and I had some general orientation to the different areas of psychology. Your background was more highly technical, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in what ways were you introduced to this as an actual discipline versus just sort of noticing dynamics in the workplace?
My own research. So it was, again, when I was introduced to organizational behavior, that was like my actual second job. So that was like the second contract that I took. So that's kind of like, when I learned about organizational behavior and learned that there was a close link to this whole psychology thing. But again, that was kind of like on the back burner. But again, you start taking these jobs and you start working. And when there is that pull that's bringing you towards something, it was like, okay, let me just do a little bit more digging. And that's when I realized it's like, oh, there's this thing called industrial psychology that's kind of related to this organizational behavior. And so that is how I made the link and the connection. But it was just really me doing my own research to try to better understand what exactly is this field? Is this something that I might possibly want to consider one day getting a PhD in?
Yeah.
That's how that came to pass.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, I didn't realize it was also connected through some of the work you had done.
Mm-hmm.
As well.
Well, it wasn't so much work that I'd done. It was just me being that individual employee and seeing the things that I was witnessing and trying to understand, because again, I was not on the HR side. Okay. And so it's just really trying to understand the dynamics and seeing how people relate to one another. I was curious. I was curious.
Yeah.
And so and again, it was just like, people have to be studying this stuff. It's like, do people study this stuff? Yeah. And that's, again, how I got introduced to these fields of study, just by being curious.
So your curiosity really took you there. And then said, I think you're right. The universe does definitely pull us in those directions as well. But it's interesting because it was it's almost like another side of your brain taking you there, right? Because you were really doing so many other more logical kinds of tasks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you mentioned, being a person of color in these corporate environments in North Carolina. You said that was also part of the picture. Was there something in particular that you experienced or that you witnessed that you felt was also part of that curiosity, or that you felt contributed to your wanting to take a deeper dive into that field?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to say that it's a multitude of things. It wasn't just necessarily one thing. So, I mean, part of it was like, when I was contracting in Pennsylvania, there was a situation where, working for a small clinical research organization where, typically the norm was to see somebody that looked like me being more on the administrative side. And also I pretty much witnessed or experienced the same thing when I had a contract position in Austin. And so it was kind of like, this idea of being treated a little differently, where expectations were perhaps a little different. Perhaps I was maybe looked at a little more closely. Because again, it's now I have to prove myself, right? I have to prove that I actually belong. And so it was going through these types of things, these types of experiences. It was also just seeing and experiencing for myself. And again, like I said, I can't necessarily talk about any one specific thing because I think it's probably a multitude of things that have happened, amongst my career. So,
Yeah, but I appreciate you mentioning that because I think that it's easy to kind of generalize, talking about different dynamics. But I think it's important to make note of the different experiences that we've had in our lives as individuals and how those might tie in with some of the choices that we make in terms of work or where we work or how we work. And it's important to acknowledge that. And, and here you are, a Black woman with a Ph.D. And so there.
There you go. Yes.
There you go.
Take that.
Take that. So you did the kind of corporate world, the corporate dance for about, you said a little over 15 years.
Yeah, give or take. Yeah.
And then you did the master's degree in organizational development while you were still working full time. Is that right?
Correct. Yes.
That must have been fun.
That was very intentional. I specifically was, because this has been the process. So it was probably about 5 or 6 years before I actually left to get my PhD. I had initially applied to PhD programs.
Oh.
Because again, that calling has always been there, I think, for me. And so I applied to all these top schools. Of course, nobody accepted me. I didn't know what the heck I was doing with those applications. But again, didn't get in. And so then it was wham, poor me. And then forgot about it, put it on the table for about 5 years.
Oh, wow.
That calling started coming back around 2009. And so I applied to more schools. This time around, didn't get in. Then, like I said, that it was there. It was like, okay, this is what I really want. So then it was a matter of, okay, what is missing in my applications? What do I need to change? And one of the things that I realized is that letters of recommendation, right? I've been out of school for quite a long time. And, when you're talking about the PhD, you're talking about folks that it's all about research. So you want those letters of recommendation from people that can speak not so much about my work experience, but the fact that I can be a good qualified researcher.
Right.
So I specifically entered that master's program so that when it came time for me to actually do my applications again, I was going to do an independent study or engage myself in some sort of research where then I would actually be able to have letters of recommendation from faculty who could speak to that for me.
Right.
And that's what I did. That is why I ended up getting that master's degree.
I see. So when you had gone through a couple of rounds of applying for PhD programs, were those master's PhD combination type programs?
Straight PhD.
Oh, okay. I see.
Yeah.
So you went separately for the master's and then went for the PhD.
Yes.
I see. Well, that makes a lot of sense then.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah. And you also have to recognize it's like my background was math and statistics. And now all of a sudden I'm wanting to get this PhD in business. And I'm just like, and so I never did an MBA or anything else like that. And so, so again, it was just trying to make the case for why I'm wanting to do what I want to do. And so much of it was because I really wanted to answer some of these questions that I've been having, or some of the things that I've been witnessing in corporate America in terms of diversity, and how do we make this better? How do we really truly make sure that there's equal access to opportunity for all, and treatment for all? And so yeah.
Right. Did you ever consider going into human resources?
I did. I had actually, looked at possibly being able to make that transition in the corporate workspace. Again, that was possibly an idea that I tossed around in terms of maybe saying, okay, if you get into HR or something like that, is this something that you would like? But again, because I was coming from that analytical backdrop, it was hard for me to make that transition.
Yeah.
And this is where I started to understand the power of networks and how it really pays to have that strong network. Because, and I'm not saying that had I had a stronger network, that I definitely would have been able to make that transition. But I think it would have been easier if I had basically maybe had that mentor, that sponsor, or somebody that can maybe really speak to my ability to transition from this analytical type of role to really more of that people-oriented type of role.
Interesting. Yeah, well, hindsight's always 20/20,
Of course,
right?
Of course. But I always say everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, so it's all good.
Yeah, well, you persevered through, 2 programs in statistics. That to me is that is perseverance, because I've taken statistics a few times. And then also, working your way through to the doctorate degree. That's amazing. And I say amazing only because I think that some people do reach a point where they either say, all right, the writing's on the wall, I guess it's not meant to be. And you said, no, it's meant to be. And some people might say, oh, it's too late, because, you were more middle-aged, so to speak, when you went for your PhD, right?
You put it out there. I was 42 when I started.
No, I don't think that's too old. But I think there are a lot of people who reach that age who would say, I don't know if I want to go to school at this age. And clearly you were hungry for this.
Yeah. And that's what it was. It's like, I really felt as though this was the thing for me, right? Yeah. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. And perhaps it was easier for me, right? I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. So I didn't necessarily have to worry about that. Yeah. So it was really just me and whatever it is that I wanted. However, I'm going to be honest, going from a 6-figure salary to going back to be a pauper as a graduate student and actually having to assume that graduate student role was it was a change.
Right? It's a big change. And it's a big change, when you are a little older. I don't think a 42 is old, believe me, but you start to think differently about your life, the older you get. I can't believe I'm keep saying that about the older part, because I don't think 42 is old, but some people might be more inclined to take that kind of a step, maybe, late 20s, 30ish, right? And, some people are less inclined to take that kind of a financial hit. So my hat's off to you for that. I think it's great. And clearly you've gotten through it and you're working.
Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Yeah. From here, what happened? After I finished that, well, I was actually still working on the dissertation while I actually took a role at James Madison University. I've been a visiting assistant professor since 2016. It is very rare, I think, for someone to visit as long as I've been visiting, but it's been working. It's been working. And so again, it's interesting because, part of me in terms of wanting to get the PhD, right, you start thinking about this idea of the picture that you create in your mind of what you think is going to be like, once you actually get the PhD, having your summers off and, maybe traveling somewhere to do perhaps a little research or something of that nature, eventually. And it's interesting. It was one of those things where, I was here at James Madison. It was time for me to start my applications for a tenure track position. And I was struggling. I was struggling to complete those applications until it dawned on me that, and like I said, I think I was watching something on TV. Somebody said something, and it was that thing that I needed to hear at that time. And I was just like, you don't want a tenure track position. And it was like, it was freeing and it was emotional, but it was just like, that's why you've been struggling. And so, and because when you think about it, right, I quit my job to go back to school for 4 years and live like a pauper, you know, to do this thing, and then to realize that that thing isn't quite what you want.
Right.
And so, but again, you know, everything happens the way it's supposed to happen, because again, my story is kind of convoluted because I got introduced to coaching when I
Right.
was working on my master's program.
Oh,
And so coaching was always going to be my side hustle,
I see.
even after I finished the PhD. And so it was one of those situations where after I completed my dissertation, which was August 2017, a few months later, I was sitting in a room for training to get certified as a coach. Because
Wow.
again, coaching never left me. I mean, I really, truly, like, you know, I mean, that bug had been bit me, like, you know, it had bit me. Um, and so again, that was still just going to be the side hustle. But then in that summer of summer of 2018, when it was time for me to actually do those applications, I was like, yeah, yeah, the teen track thing isn't for me. So then I was like, well, now might be the time. Hang up your own shingle. Have your own coaching and consulting business. And so
Right.
here I am. This is how that came to pass. So it's like,
Yeah.
you know, another transition. So yeah.
So, it's really, I love this whole string of things, how you've been led to where you are, because as certain things unfolded along the way, the answers you needed also kept cropping up, and you listened. And I think what a lot of people do, unfortunately, I guess, is they don't listen to that voice that tells them, here's what you really want. Because there's this other kind of, I call it the voice of the gremlin, actually, the gremlin voice that tells you, oh, no, 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 this is what you really want. This, because it's more of the sort of the status quo voice saying, well, this is what you should do. It's the should voice, right? And when, so I think that it takes something, I don't know if it's the word special is right, but it does take a certain level of self-knowledge and sort of consciousness to be able to listen to that voice when it shows up. You go and you get a PhD, you have an expectation, right? And an intention. I'm going to teach. I'm going to get this PhD. Most people who get a PhD in management do have some expectation that they will teach, maybe go tenure track.
Mm-hmm.
I just recently interviewed Jim Carr, who also got his PhD in management and had also been on that path, and then decided to do some things differently as well. And it doesn't preclude you from teaching, but most people don't go for a PhD in business unless they are planning on teaching or being somehow involved in academia. And because it doesn't really serve you to have a PhD in management for any other reason, really. And then, so you have these expectations and this vision and this plan, and then you get through it and you realize, oh, that's not what I want.
Yeah.
And you listen to that rather than, oh, well, that was my plan, so I have to stick with it. So what do you think changed for you that made you realize that you didn't want that? Because you kind of went into it with the intention that you were going to be on this kind of academic path in some ways, right?
Mm-hmm. I think what it really was is all about this idea of impact and influence, right? So when you think about it as somebody that's in the academy, right? It's about publications. It's about all this research and putting that stuff out there. But when you think about where you are publishing your work, typically it is journals that the average person will never have access to. So you have all this intellect that is basically just circling around academia. That doesn't necessarily hit the average person and really may be able to actually put it into practice, a lot of the stuff that people are researching. And so for me, that was very important because that really was my driving force behind me going back and wanting to get that PhD, in order to really maybe make a change in terms of the way in which I saw corporate America operating. And so it was a matter of, I felt at my age, because at that point in time, what was I, 46, 47, whatever the case may be, I was like, yeah, I'm not willing to play this publish or perish game. I'm like, because also I saw it as though maybe if you go to the administration route, right, then maybe you can really have more of a say and influence there.
Yeah.
But I felt as though by the time I go through the tenure track, whatever, it might be time for me to retire, whatever not. And so for me, it was about this idea of where can I make my impact now? How can I make my impact now? How can I really, truly have more of an impact on individuals and or organizations in terms of bringing about these things that are so important to me? And now important to a lot of folks, because now it's all over in terms of discussion about diversity and inclusion and equity and whatnot. Yeah. And so And so for me, that's why I realized that was not the route for me, because that was not the way in which I wanted to make my impact and leave my legacy.
Yeah.
I feel that there's a different story that I'm creating, a different path that I'm creating for me.
Right.
Not saying that there's anything wrong with anybody that wants to stay in academia. I love their research. I love reading it.
Yeah.
I just did not want to go down that path.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's an important distinction too, because it also doesn't preclude you from teaching. You can still teach, but it doesn't lock you into that system in that way.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So for now, you are a visiting professor at JMU, James Madison University, and you are also coaching and consulting. Tell us what your coaching and consulting practice looks like. Who are you working with? What's your ideal client looking like? And also tell us about your My Stuck to Soaring career framework and quiz. I'm curious to hear more about that.
Okay. All right. So in terms of my coaching, again, for me, it's about impact, right? So, and again, being a woman, being a Black woman, I more gravitate towards wanting to help those mid-career professional women that find themselves perhaps hitting that glass ceiling, that find themselves stuck. They are at that point where it's like, okay, there's something else meant for me. Maybe they know what it is, maybe they don't know what it is, but they're just not able to really truly figure out how to break through that ceiling. And I often say that, definitely discrimination exists, right? So a lot of times, when we talk about the glass ceiling, it can definitely be imposed by organizations, whatever practices, policies that they may have in place. But I also believe that we as individuals, we also impose our own barriers.
Oh, definitely.
And so for me, the way in which I approach my coaching is that I want people to recognize that regardless of whatever your circumstances are, regardless of whatever you feel the universe might be throwing at you, you always have choice, and that there's power in you having that choice. And so therefore it is up to you to really recognize, okay, I know that maybe there might be all these, things happening outside of me, but let me look also within myself and let me get very clear in terms of what it is that I want. Why do I want it? And what's stopping me from going after it, and recognizing that it's all within me to have it. And that's what I do with my coaching clients. I want people to get to that place where they are empowered to live their life on their terms.
Yeah. And as coaches, we often have to kind of be the person to hold that mirror up in front of somebody just to remind them that they have that choice. Because it's easy to lose sight of that if you're feeling stressed or you're feeling, marginalized in some way or treated differently. So that's a really important thing that we can do, is just to help remind people. right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. 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 And so that's what the coaching is. And what came out of that was my Stuck to Soaring career framework. I still don't know if I want to stay with that name, but that's what it is right now.
Mhm.
But it was a way for me to be able to speak to people to help them understand where or how they may be stuck in
Ah,
their career. And so it's a simple 4 quadrant framework. And so it really focuses on the premise of what I call visibility and mobility, right? So in other words, how clear we are in terms of what we want for our lives, and also the mobility in terms of where we are in terms of the action that we're taking to get to where we want to be. So for example, I might call what I call the bystander is an individual who doesn't necessarily know what they want. They're definitely not taking any sort of action. They're basically just kind of, letting life and their career just happen to them, right? Kind of like, we're wishing and hoping on a prayer that basically somebody will notice them and just give them that promotion or whatever. Then I have like the wanderer, right? So that's going to be my individual. They're doing all sorts of things. They're thinking that the grass is greener, on the next side, or they have that shiny object syndrome, right? Just keep trying things. Again, basically they're taking the action, but they still don't necessarily have that clarity in terms of what it is that they're working towards. Then we have my paralyzed voyager. So this is the person that they know what they want, but they're not taking the actions. They see it, but again, they're stuck. And that's where, really, those inner blocks are usually, working really strongly within those individuals that are keeping them to where they want to go. And so at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is get to what I call the pioneer. And so
mhm.
this is that person that is really, truly very clear in terms of what they want, and they're taking those necessary steps and actions to create the life, the vision, the career that they want for themselves. And so it's also recognizing that within that, you can be in any one of those quadrants at various points in times in your career. And that's okay. I think it's just as long as, we always have that awareness of understanding where we are at that particular point in time, and then what are the levers that maybe we need to pull in order for us
Yes,
to get to where we need to be.
I love
And
it.
so and so that is essentially what the framework does. And so it kind of builds upon this idea of us making sure that we get that clarity, that we understand what that motivation is, what the why is behind what it is that we want, and also helping people to understand that it's okay for us to test things out. You don't
Hmm.
have to go full force into something, right? It's about maybe sometimes just the small steps, not necessarily doesn't always have to be the big steps. But yeah, and so that is essentially kind of what the framework is about. And so I developed like a little quiz that will help people, identify where they might be within the quadrant. And again, it gives us an easy common language for us to talk,
Now,
you
is
know.
that a quiz that people can go to your website and access, or
Yes, they
that's a
can.
oh,
It's sitting right there on my landing page on my website.
all
So go to my
right.
website and it's
So,
right there.
all right. Well, we will have that on the in the show notes. So that's dfhservices.net. That's your
Correct.
website, and
Hmm.
that sounds brilliant to me. I love the way you just described that. And I could see where that would be so helpful to so many people, really thinking about what the idea of where the leverage points might be and getting at their why. I'm always working with people on their why. But I love the idea of giving them a leverage point, because I think so often people don't know where to begin to even
Hmm.
start to look at things. And
Yes.
so by having those leverage points, it gives them a place to start, but it also gives them a place to go to.
Yes.
So that framework does give them both of what they need. And with a great coach like yourself on hand,
Yes.
they actually have the opportunity to actually figure it out. Uh,
Exactly.
that's great. I love that. That's a
Thank you.
wonderful. I like Stuck to Soaring. I don't
Okay. All
I,
right.
I think it's great. I think it really captures it beautifully. And the whole notion of visibility and mobility, those are two very important concepts in there. And it all ties in with our motivation, which is really what moves us forward, right?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And as you said, I mean, for me, that why is so important. It's because I always tell people it's like that becomes your tether, right? That is the thing that is like when you hold on to that why, and you know what your goal is, what your vision is. But when you know what that why is, there's nothing that will stop you from making sure that you accomplish it. If that why is really meaningful to you and it really matters to you, that's the thing that's going to keep you working towards that goal. That's why that why is so important.
I mean, your career path and your trajectory is a perfect example of that. So even though you applied to these PhD programs and you didn't get in right away, you held on to your why and you kept going.
Yeah.
And even once you got into a PhD program and you finished the PhD program and then you decided you didn't want to go on the tenure track, you were still very clear about your why. The only thing that changed was your what a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Your why hasn't really changed.
No, just not at all.
You took the resources and the knowledge and all the background that you've developed and you leveraged them to move them in the right direction where you need to go.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're walking your talk for sure.
Oh, I appreciate that. I like that. Yes, I try to be authentic.
Oh, I think you do more than try. I think you're an example of it. So, and I don't say that just to, butter you up. I think you really are. And I think, you've made a lot of, I love the example of your the path that you've taken, because it's full of intention. It's full of authenticity. You've made very conscious decisions along the way. And I love that example, because I think that too often people don't give themselves a chance to take those steps or to let their curiosity really blossom the way you did. I think they tamp it down and they brush it aside because they think there's too many other things they have to take into account,
Oh, yeah.
And,
definitely.
I love it. I love where you've taken all of this. So I know that you're teaching now, coming semester. We are in the middle of our lovely pandemic.
Yes.
You are getting ready to teach in the fall of 2020, where we are we're getting close to that right now. And anything else coming up for you that our listeners should know about?
Not so much. I mean, it's like, just continuing to build the business. My game plan is eventually to remove myself from academia, more on this full-time basis, where it's really just going to be my coaching and consulting business and get that going. But for now, it's serving its purpose. I also, like I said, diversity is very important to me. So this coming academic year, I have an opportunity to do some diversity work for our College of Business. So it's like everything happens, like I said, the way in which it's supposed to happen. And so I'm excited about that, to see, what I can possibly do to help, with the College of Business with that, especially, at James Madison University. In light of everything that's going on in our country, and just build from there,
Nice.
Yeah.
So a real opportunity to blend both the coaching and the diversity work as well.
Yeah.
That's great. It sounds like a really robust blend of opportunity.
I'm excited. I'm excited. When they posed that to me, it's like, well, okay, yeah. And so it's like, when you listen to the universe, it will give you what you want, so.
Yeah, you have to source it too, right?
Yeah.
Well, Demetria, thank you so much for sharing your story and all your insights. This has really been interesting. And all of the information, all the ways that people can get in touch with you through LinkedIn, Facebook, your website, all of that will be in the show notes. And folks, keep your eyes and ears open, because I know Demetria is going to be up to some big things going forward. So
yes, I will. Stay tuned.
Yes, stay tuned. And thank you again for being here today.
Thanks for having me. This has been great. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Demetria Henderson. It was so interesting to speak with her to learn about her professional journey. What is your key takeaway from our interview? If you are interested in any of the resources or links mentioned in today's podcast, you can find them on the blog page of my website at www.tammygoularloeb.com. Just look for episode 098. Are you thinking about what your next professional move is going to be? Perhaps there was a thought or idea that was sparked by listening to today's podcast that you'd like to put into motion in your life. Or maybe you're just feeling a little stuck. Get specialized group and individualized support, insights, and accountability from a brilliant mix of professional women in a safe, non-judgmental, creative space. Join one of my small hybrid mastermind coaching groups, starting on a rolling basis. You can learn more at https://bit.ly/navigating career change. If you were inspired by this episode with Demetria, please share it with your friends and colleagues, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss next week's show. Remember, subscribing is always free. Are you enjoying the podcast? I'd love to read your review on Apple Podcasts. It's easy to find through my website at www.tammygoulerloeb.com/podcast. Just click on the Apple Podcast button and follow the instructions provided there. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, it's never too late or too impossible to increase your sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your work and other meaningful activities. Let me know how it's going for you. And who knows, maybe you'll be my next interview on this podcast. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to the Work from the Inside Out podcast. For more information, you can find us at www.workfromtheinsideout.com.